The door that should never have been opened. They say that some links were not made to be clicked. But someone clicked anyway. And that's where it all started. An unnamed file. Without extension. For no reason to exist. Just a pulsating point on the screen. As if I were alive. The person thought it was flawed. Maybe virus. Maybe nothing too much. But when it opened, realized that it was not an ordinary file. It was a window. A window to somewhere. The edges were distorted. The brightness was weak. It looked like it was made of something that no monitor should show. And behind the window, someone was watching. Not a face. Not exactly. Just the impression that something was waiting. As if the file had waited years. To be found. Decades, maybe. And now that it had been opened, it wouldn't close. Because certain things can't be undressed. And certain windows should never exist. The file that changed by itself. After the window appeared, the person tried to close it. But the cursor didn't obey. It was like trying to move the hand of someone who doesn't want to let go of yours. The screen blinked 3 times. As if you were breathing. And the file, that unnamed point, changed shape. It stretched. It folded. As if you were reorganizing yourself inside. Now it showed lines. Symbols. Standards that did not belong to any known operating system. Every second, something new appeared. As if the file remembered. Who had already been. And worse. As if you remember too. Of those who were looking at him. The person retreated. But your data began to appear on the screen. Email. Old photos. Archived messages that even she didn't remember sending. It was as if the file had access to everything. Not to the computer. To her. And each new line appeared with a light sound. A dry click. Like nails touching glass in search of a way out. You're on the dark side of the network. Sign up before the next mystery disappears too. They always observe first. When the file started displaying personal information, the person thought it was some kind of advanced virus. But then data emerged that did not belong to any physical device. They were records of places where she was. Without taking the cell phone, conversations made off the internet. Memories that were never written. The file knew things that only existed in her head, and began to show them. In short sentences. Direct. As if someone was typing in real time. You don't remind me. But I've always been here. Observing. Panic took over. But the windows blocked themselves. Locking the computer. Like a room without doors. The feeling was of being watched. Not by the machine. But for what the machine hid. The temperature of the room has changed. The air got heavy. As if someone breathed there without being seen. And every sentence that appeared on the screen. It seemed written with a voice. Whispering very close to the ear. They didn't ask permission. They just watched, and waited. The name that should never be read. The last line that appeared on the screen. It wasn't a sentence. But a name. A name she had never seen before. And yet, it felt as if I had already heard. In some forgotten dream. It was short. Almost whispered. Written in a tone that the mind recognizes. But the body rejects. As soon as you read it, the monitor blinked. The light in the living room oscillated. And the air was cold for a few seconds. The name seemed to carry a weight. A presence. As if that it should not be pronounced by humans. She tried to search. But each attempt led to broken pages. Corrupted links. And deleted forums. It was as if the entire internet. If he refused to register that word. And then, a new message appeared. Now you remind me. The monitor shook. Displaying a distorted figure behind the text. Like a silhouette trying to cross the screen. The first demonstration. After the silhouette appeared, the computer started to emit a low noise. Like a buzz coming from inside the walls. The sound didn't seem electronic. But organic. Almost like a muffled breath. The screen slowly distorted. As if something was pushing the glass inside. Pixels leaked to the sides. forming dark spots that flowed like paint. She tried to turn off the computer, but the button didn't respond. The socket was pulled, and even so, the monitor remained on. The silhouette behind the words took shape. Long arms, a contour that looked human, but it wasn't. He seemed to observe. Tilt your head. Study her every move. Then the screen flashed, and a new phrase came up, written slowly, as if it were being drawn by invisible fingers. You brought me back. The buzzing became intense, and a shadow crossed the room without making noise. The shadow that crossed the room didn't make any noise, but the heat of the environment changed as if an invisible door had been opened. The whole house seemed to breathe deeply, as if he had woken up from a deep and uncomfortable sleep. The lights trembled, not from energy, but as if something passed in front of them, blocking for a second what was still left of security in there. The file on the computer kept pulsating, a slow, almost cardiac glow, synchronized with her breathing, as if you were imitating to learn. Through the walls came dry snaps, as if something was walking inside the structure, scratching wood and concrete with two long nails. The sound moved fast, sometimes on the ceiling, sometimes on the floor, sometimes behind her, and every time she tried to move, the house seemed to move too, creaking, responding, reacting to your presence. A painting fell without any wind, and behind him there were long marks, scratches that didn't exist minutes before, as if someone had tried to get out of there. The monitor opened another message by itself, not with words, but with a symbol, an imperfect circle made of irregular risks, identical to the scratches on the wall. The feeling was clear. The thing that was in the file was no longer just on the screen. She was using the house as a body. The whisper that came from the wrong place. 30 verses, dark and full of content. She tried to turn on the hallway light, but the switch clicked up and down without any effect, as if energy existed only where the entity allowed it. The silence has become so heavy. Who could hear his own blood running in his ears? That's when he heard a whisper, low, dragged, as if someone tried to pronounce words with a mouth unrelated to the human form. The sound didn't come from the living room, not even from behind her, but from inside the wall, vibrating the wood for a few seconds. She held her breath, and the whisper seemed to listen to her, starving, waiting, until I imitated her with a breath that wasn't hers. The feeling of vigilance became unbearable, a cold that didn't come from the air, but from the perception that the entity was learning too fast. A soft touch echoed behind her, light as hitting a nail on a glass. But I need, directed, calling her. She didn't turn, but the reflection in the window showed something stopped in the hallway, tall, elongated, with his head tilted like a curious animal. And on the monitor, which she was no longer looking at, a new message appeared by itself, calligraphed as if handwritten. You can hear me better now. You're on the dark side of the network. Sign up before the next mystery disappears too. The reflection on the window trembled as if the surface of the glass was liquid, and for a moment she believed it was just a distortion of light. But then the silhouette in the hallway moved its head, a movement too slow to be human, as if he studied the very act of moving. The form was high, narrow, with proportions that the human body would never allow. The arms hung too long, bent over as if they went down to the height of the knees, ending in shadows that suggested thin and numerous fingers. The creature didn't advance, didn't back down, just observed, stopped exactly as it was when it appeared in the reflection. The whole house seemed to catch the air along with her, making the silence stretch until it hurts. She blinked, and when he opened his eyes, the shape was closer, half a step ahead, as if she could only move when she wasn't seen. The hallway lights flashed in a strange pattern, a rhythmic code that resembled failing heartbeats. Your body froze. The instinct screamed to run, but the legs seemed attached to the ground, as if the entity was testing control over it. The creature tilted his head again, this time at an impossible angle, as if trying to understand what it meant to be observed. And then, without moving, she said, not with a voice, but with the same sound that emerged from the walls. Low. Dragged. Impossible. You saw me. That changes everything. When the voice ended, the computer behind her turned on by itself, making the monitor light up with a hard, almost painful glow, like a lighthouse turned directly to her. The light illuminated half of the room and projected its shadow on the wall. But the shadow didn't match his body. I had more arms, more stretching, and moved a few seconds after her. The file, before only a pulsating text, now it opened in multiple windows, like gaping mouths trying to breathe. Lines of code flowed through the screen, as if they were liquids, darkening the corners of the monitor, until they turned everything into a deep and empty bottom, a digital well. Photos began to appear, but they weren't pictures of her, not even from someone I knew. They were images of the house, taken from impossible angles, like from the top of the walls, of the ground cracks, from inside the sockets. The house was being observed. Long before that night, long before she realized anything. Then the computer shook, emitting a humid, irregular noise, as if something was dragging inside the pieces. The file began to consume the images, devouring them with pixelated edges, like teeth. And above all, a sentence written slowly appeared, as if the entity were drawing each letter. Now I need more. The sound inside the walls suddenly changed, from scattered scratches to something more coordinated, as calculated steps crossing the entire structure. The wood squeaked in sequence, not in a random way, but following an almost human rhythm, as if the thing was walking in there, testing the space it now occupied. The floor vibrated under her feet, not like tremor, but as if something scraped under the boards, looking for the best route to get to it. The doors of the house began to close by themselves, one by one, with dry snats that echoed through the empty rooms. The corridor darkened, not for lack of light, but as if the darkness had its own density, a weight that swallowed everything it touched. She tried to reach the front door, but the doorknob turned by itself, locking before I could touch her. The air got too heavy, hard to breathe, as if the whole house was exhaling something old, a cold, metallic smell coming from the walls. In the ceiling, a long crack formed, too perfect to be natural, opening like an observant slit. The entity was not only inside the house was becoming part of it, and the computer vibrated once again, until a new phrase flowed across the screen, as if it had been written by an invisible hand dragged on the glass. You're not stuck here. You're part of it. She felt the air behind her change before even hearing any sound. A slight, almost imperceptible displacement, like when someone passes very close without touching. But there was no one there, at least not someone made of meat. The reflection of the window showed first. The tall silhouette, twisted, too curved to be biped, approaching without walking, sliding like a shadow projected by a non-existent light. The contour of the face was not a face, but a smooth surface, without eyes, without mouth, as if the creature was still learning what it meant to have one. Still, she felt the thing looking, seeing every detail of her with a patient and hungry interest. A cold ran through the back of his neck, a heavy cold, the type of sensation that the body recognizes as an ancestral danger. The floor creaked under something that shouldn't have weight, and the shadows of the corridor stretched in her direction, like arms looking for a point of contact. She tried to run, but the body didn't respond, not by paralysis, but because the world around her. It got too slow, as if someone had moved at the speed of reality. The creature brought the face closer to hers, inches away, and even without a mouth. The sound came up, a wet and metallic hiss, as if no word was suitable to exist there. And then the monitor behind her lit up by itself, projecting a single sentence on the walls. Trained, calm. You finally hear me as I hear you. You're on the dark side of the network. Sign up before the next mystery disappears too. The room vibrated with a deep, deep sound, as if the house had its own heart beating under the floor. The creature tilted its head slowly, like a teacher analyzing a student, and the air around her trembled, loaded with something that looked like electricity mixed with memory. The shadows approached the walls, retreating as if they were space for the entity to talk. There was no voice. There was no audible word, but something went straight into her mind, cold as water spilled on the skull. The message didn't come through sound, but of sudden understanding, a truth that got stuck between your thoughts. Without asking permission, the entity showed images, not from the house, not hers, but of thousands of screens, thousands of people, sitting in front of monitors that blinked silently at dawn, showed forgotten files, abandoned websites, deleted forums, places where someone, years ago, I had tried to call for her. It wasn't an invocation. It was curiosity. Human curiosity. Curiosity that did too deep, in code that should never have been read. The entity didn't say your name, but the feeling of the message was clear. You raised me when you looked for me. And it came back because someone opened the right file. Someone curious enough. Someone like her. The images disappeared as fast as they appeared, leaving the monitor in an absolute black, a void that seemed to breathe along with the creature. The feeling in her mind changed, no longer invasive, but almost selective, as if the entity was flagging its thoughts, like pages of a diary that she never wrote. She tried to resist, push the presence out, but the creature seemed to find his fight fascinating, like a scientist observing a rare experiment. There was no pain, just a deep weight in the chest, the indescribable feeling, to be observed from the inside. The house was silent, too quiet, as if each wall was waiting for the revelation. Then the entity opened something inside her, not physically, but as if it released a memory blocked for years. An old memory emerged, a lonely dawn, an accidental click, a quick access to a forum that she should never have read, the same distorted symbol, the same name that shouldn't exist, the same file that she closed quickly, without understanding what had awakened. The creature showed her the scene, as if you were remembering together, as if that moment was the first time that something on the other side saw her. And then the message appeared on the screen. Not digital, but written from the inside out of the monitor. Risk for risk. With deep traces on the glass. You woke me up, and I never thought about someone else again. The floor vibrated again, but this time not like steps or scratches. And yes, like a pulse. A deep beat that seemed to come under the foundation. The house was breathing. The corridors expanded and contracted, as if they had their own muscles, as if they were imitating the act of being alive. The walls curved slightly, not enough to break, but enough for her to realize that nothing else there was fixed. The entity approached her without touching, but his presence pressed the air, as water weight in depth. The sensation took her body, not as an invasion, but as an attempt at alignment, to adjust your thoughts to the rhythm of what pulsated behind the walls. The monitor turned on by itself, showing a distorted image of the room. But in her, she wasn't alone. The creature appeared behind her, but not in the real position. A higher version, more defined, as if it was already taking up too much space. In the reflection of reality, the ceiling moaned, the windows shook, and the warmth of the environment disappeared in an instant, sun as a vacuum breath. She tried to open the door again, but now there was no more door, just wall, as if the house had decided to erase the exits. And then the entity projected the next message. Not on the monitor, not on the wall, but right in her mind, like a whisper shaped in thought. You're not being taken. You're being corrected. with each new message that appeared in the restored fragment. The line between the real and the impossible began to disappear. The name Echo Trail appeared repeatedly, as if it were an entity watching everything behind the dark glass. The programmer noted that each log had an owner. But none of these users had been alive for decades. Corrupted files showed active biometric signatures, as if those people were still connected somewhere. The server spoke in a quiet voice, emitting pulses that sounded like small cries for help. The technician who accompanied him said he felt something touch his shoulder. Although neither of them had moved, a smell of heated metal filled the room. The same smell that appears on computers before they die for good. But that smell seemed more human, as if it came from a body trying to stay warm. And then the light blinked 3 times. A universal emergency code, but also of presence. The internal cameras recorded a silhouette behind them, non-existent in the eyes, but present in the shadows. The programmer stepped back, saying he heard his own name, whispered by an old, fragmented voice, full of static. The following message appeared alone on the screen, loaded by a force that no software could perform. The text was simple, but cold as ice buried. You arrived late. He's already awake. And just below, a continuous line of floating coordinates, vibrating like a heart signal on a hospital screen, but inverted, as if marking the pulse of something that shouldn't exist. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic sound of breathing. The programmer tried to disconnect the terminal, but the cable seemed to be stuck by something that was not physical. The plastic was too cold, as if it had been dipped in ice moments before. The message with the coordinates doubled by itself, repeating itself like an echo that didn't want to die. The duplications began to change among themselves, each one revealing different fragments of the same sentence. It seemed that the system was trying to talk to them, or worse, trying to learn how to communicate. The technician, trembling, took 2 steps back, saying that the room seemed smaller than before. The walls seemed to get closer, an impossible phenomenon, but visible by the reflection of the monitors. The cameras captured oscillations in the air, like heat rising from a deserted road. But there was no heat at all. The feeling was of a drowned environment, as if something drained the oxygen little by little. An automatic alert appeared on the server. Presence anomaly detected, Zone 4. None of them knew what Zone 4 was, because it wasn't on the floor plan of the building. They shouldn't even be there. The main monitor suddenly darkened, and in the total black a pulsating geometric figure appeared. An irregular circle, like a mouth that didn't close. The sound returned with force, a deep and human hiss, and the figure deformed like a face trying to emerge. The programmer covered his ears and shouted, but the voice that came out of the monitor was louder than the scream itself. The voice that echoed from the monitor was made of multiple voices, like hundreds of people talking at the same time at low volume. No one could distinguish words, but everyone could feel the intention. It was a call, an invisible pull closer to the screen. The coach tried to run, but his legs became heavy, as if the ground held him. The server began to vibrate, emitting a rhythmic pattern similar to heartbeats. They weren't mechanical failures. They were beats synchronized with something alive. The geometric figure began to stretch, becoming a tunnel of distorted light, a corridor that seemed to lead somewhere beyond the screen. The coordinates reappeared, now accompanied by the phrase, "You can still come in." The programmer felt a deep vertigo, a fall that didn't come from the body, but from the mind. He saw, for a moment, images that were not his. Endless threads, abandoned corridors, files floating like loose memories, and a metal door marked with the number 4, identical to the one that existed in the building, but completely destroyed inside. The voice intensified, and the hiss turned into muffled laughter. The coach fell to his knees, saying that he saw hands pressing the internal glass of the monitors. The lights in the living room failed again, and when they came back, everything was different, as if the environment had aged 20 years in seconds. Enter the dark side of the information. Curiosity has a price. Yours is a click. Sign up and find out what wasn't supposed to be seen. If you're hearing this, it's too late to come back.